First things first, let's get everything ready. We're going to begin by taking parchment paper and tracing it so it fits the shape of our cake molds. Got my parchment paper here. I'm going to trace it. You can use a pencil, pen, whatever you have at home. Arts and crafts time, go ahead and cut that out. Go ahead and grease our cake pans with some cooking spray so that it doesn't stick. And we're going to put our parchment paper that we've cut out in the middle, and then we're going to lightly dust it with some flour. This is really going to prevent your cake from sticking. And you're going to want to take these over to your sink and kind of dump out the excess flour. It should look something like that. Moving on, we're going to start to cream together our butter and sugar. So I've got my butter here. It's been sitting out at room temperature. In fact, I melted it a little bit further in the microwave, but you got to be careful because you don't want it to get melted too much. And so I'm adding my sugar in there, and I'm going to hand cream my butter and my sugar together. And basically what you're looking for is a end result of some butter that kind of looks like the consistency of mashed potatoes. It's going to be light, creamy, fluffy, and it's going to have some air pockets in there that are really going to incorporate into a nice texture for our cake. I'm using a wooden spoon, and I'm also using a plastic spatula because you're going to want to scrape down the sides of your bowl as you're creaming together your butter and your sugar. As you're probably noticing, I'm doing this by hand, but if you have an electronic mixer at home or a KitchenAid mixer, handheld mixer, whatever your choice, you can go ahead and do that as well. I like to do everything by hand in my kitchen so that maybe students who don't have the equipment can still participate. I should mention this is going to take quite some time, about 5 to 6 minutes. You're just going to want to keep working at it until you get the correct consistency. When you're done, it should look approximately like this, like mashed potatoes. Most cake recipes, you're going to want to add your eggs one at a time. I'm mixing mine up ahead of time and then adding a little bit as we go. So I've got my cream butter and sugar. I'm going to add in some egg, about 1/4 of that, like 1 out of the 4 eggs. And I'm going to just mix it up and then add more each time. Wow, look at that. Adding our vanilla for a little flavor. We've set aside our wet ingredients, and now we're going to be putting together our dry ingredients using an impromptu sifter, which in this case is a strainer. So I'm going to sift all those together, give it a good mix with a whisk, and we're ready to rock and roll. At this juncture, we're going to be adding our dry ingredients a little bit at a time, along with our milk, kind of alternating between the two. And I'm doing kind of an impromptu folding method, Mr. Etzel's folding method, not the most graceful folding method, but essentially you're going to be mixing very slowly and gently as opposed to just like going at it, because you don't want to develop too much gluten complex. We're using cake flour, which has a lower amount of protein than all-purpose flour, and so not as much gluten will be formed, and therefore your cake will not be super chewy and spongy. Let's go ahead and fill our cake pans. As you're filling them, try to make sure that they are equal in the amount that you put in them, and then maybe take your spatula, go over the top, make them nice and smooth. It'll help them to bake more evenly. And into the oven we go. The best way to check to see if your cake is done is with a toothpick. If it comes out gummy and there's crumbs on the side of it, it's not done. It should come out relatively clean. It looks good. I've got my little area set up here. I got some pot holders so that my hot cake pans don't burn my countertop here. And I'm gonna let them cool for about 2 to 3 minutes. I'm gonna take a little butter knife and just go around the edges, make sure that the cake is not stuck to the pan. I'm going to invert the cakes onto a cooling rack, and I'm gonna let them cool for a good amount of time, probably about a little over an hour. You do not wanna have your cake be too warm while you're icing it, or it's going to turn out messy. While that's cooling, it's a good time to work on your buttercream frosting. There's my wooden bowl again, so you know what time it is. Creaming time! So I'm going to wake up the butter there, give it a good little mix with my little wooden spoon. This time, instead of using granulated sugar, we're going to be using powdered sugar. And so I got powdered sugar, I've got our cocoa powder, got our salt in there, and we're just going to give it a good beating there with some milk, as well as our vanilla. And you are going to work at this for quite some time. You'll be able to notice the difference as you work your way through it. As your hand is getting super tired, now would be a good time to mention you can use, handheld mixer or a KitchenAid to do this. Time to put the icing on the cake. Now the ideal tool for frosting a cake would be an offset spatula or a straight blade. None of those I have at my house, so I'm just using a butter knife, the kitchen knives that you have. And as you're frosting your cake, go ahead and have some fun with it. You can wiggle your hand a little bit as you're frosting. This will create little peaks and swirls, give it a little bit of a design. After you finish the first layer, you can go ahead and add the second layer and add some frosting to the top of that. And after you get the top done, you can go ahead and work your way onto the sides. Growing up, this was my favorite cake to have on my birthday. We never made it exactly from scratch. We always got the box of it from the supermarket. I think it was like Duncan Hines. And just have a lot of great childhood memories of eating yellow cake with chocolate frosting.